Hello and welcome to another episode of the Parent and NI podcast. If this is your first time listening, we are the leading parent and sport charity in Northern Ireland, and we get together each month to bring you this podcast and to discuss the parenting topics you want to know more about. This month we're talking about exam results. It's hard to believe, but we're only about a week or so away from those wee envelopes arriving, and so young people and parents may be starting to feel the nerves creeping in. So with that in mind, this month we'll be discussing managing your expectations when it comes to your young person's exam results. And a little bit later on, I'll be chatting to Young Enterprise about recognising young people's potential and developing their entrepreneurial and employability skills. So now I have Maria Rogan with me. How are you, Maria?
Hiya.
Maria is our Director for Training and Development, but she's here today without her work hat on. She'll be talking about her most important job, and that is being a mum.
Totally.
So Maria, you have a son who is...
I have a 19-year-old son, yes.
Yes, okay. And so thinking back a couple of years ago to when he was at school,
yes,
and was taking his exams, what was that kind of experience like?
Absolutely, and I think it goes right back to third year when you choose your subjects.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's about, the apprehension of the young person, but also me as a parent. You're thinking at that time that you should choose these subjects that will put him in a path for his career for the rest of his life. So that can be quite daunting, not just for me as a parent, but also for my son, the young person. So looking at his subject choices, he decided to choose what he really loved, what he was passionate about, and one of those subjects was art. But some of the subjects he really didn't fully understand what those subjects entailed, what the jump between third year into GCSE and the coursework that it entailed. So it has been a learning curve, and as a parent, you just have to follow that journey. But through GCSE year, there was challenges because it's continuous assessment. So it's not that at the end of your fifth year, at the end of your 2 years of study of GCSEs, that those exam results, it's continuous exams, which is quite good because the young person and me as a parent knows how he's getting on, what his grades are like, and what he needs extra help and support with. So that journey is challenging, but it's quite good for him to explore what he likes, what he doesn't like.
Yeah.
When you're in fourth year, you're doing, assessments maybe at Christmas, some in June, then the following year, there's continuous exams. So it's that pressure where, I suppose looking at my son, he took it in his stride. It didn't faze him.
Yeah.
And maybe into the latter of the fifth year when there's so much at once, and understanding how to study. And not knowing how do you do that, and not being equipped to do that, and also my expectations that I expected him to be locked in a room for hours studying when that's not realistic.
No.
And it's about balance and all of that, and also making sure that he's coping with that okay, which he did okay, but coming up into the latter end of his GCSEs, his decision to stay on at school, he wasn't comfortable in that. It didn't motivate him anymore. He's seen the world as a bigger place, so that started our conversation on what could he do after his GCSEs, which was quite good to discuss that early. And think about those options early in our family, not just in school. So then as a family we thought, well, what are your options? And for us, we decided just listen and make sure that we as a parent helped him look at all the options, even outside of school. And I know through school and through the Careers Advisory Service and through Careers Advice in school, there was a lot of more emphasis down the academic route. And I wanted to make sure the door was open. The door was open no matter what route and what options there were. And I do think, looking back at the process, my son going to the local college to look at his options and speak to their careers advisors was very beneficial.
You were well prepared, so even before the kind of results were coming through the door, you had thought about all the different options that he had. So when August kind of came around then, and you were waiting on that wee envelope coming through the door, what was that kind of experience like too? Would you have any words of wisdom for parents who are going through that in a week or so?
I think, for me, the envelope didn't come through the door in that respect, because we went to the school, and I think a lot of schools do that now, where you go to the school to pick up your results. But there's a lot of pressure there, not just for the young person, but you as a parent. Because when I can remember the day so vividly, we went down to the school, all his friends were there, some friends he hadn't seen since he finished school in June. Teachers were there, principals were there, and he went and got his wee envelope. And his apprehension, he never thought of it all summer, but it wasn't until those couple of days where the conversation was starting between him and his friends that he realised, oh, my results are coming out. But going down looking at that, probably because he's a boy, he's very independent, so he wanted to open the results on his own. And then it was, how do you decipher the results? Because the page is quite complex. So to look at, what did I get, for example, in my business studies? So to look at the grade on the sheet, you really had to take a moment to see what that was. Because it's not laid out as clearly. Yes, so as a parent, to be prepared to maybe just take a moment and look at that sheet. I let him open it at his own space. But as a parent, for me, not to kind of to take a bit of time to look at what the results said and listen to him. So he was telling me what the results were, and we were very impressed that he did so much better than he thought he was going to do. But then that opened more options and confusion for us. Because before we opened the envelope and he was in the school environment, he knew what he wanted to do. So his choice, and we spent 6 months deciding this, was that he wanted to become an apprentice electrician. And that option, it's not an easy option. There's a lot of hurdles that you have to go through the interviewing process, through the application process in the college. So to make that decision was a journey. But then on the morning of his GCSE results, it was like he hadn't made that decision. The decision was just all up in the air because he did so much better than he thought. And he was surrounded by his mates, and he was surrounded by the teachers, that then he thought, maybe should he stay on at school? So I would give parents the tips, looking back to what I did, was not to make a rash decision there and then. He could have very easily, and he was being easily encouraged to stay on at school. Which I knew in my heart was not the right decision for him because of the experience for the previous 6 months in school. So my tip would be to leave the school grounds, go and have a coffee, which is what we did. We went and had a coffee, not surrounded by friends and teachers and outside influences, and just take a moment. And I think that allowed him to reflect on why he made the choice he was going to make, and also to discuss, is that the right choice? Without that peer pressure. Because when you're in an environment and all your mates are all buzzing around the place, and some have got better results and some haven't, then you can get sucked into that.
Absolutely. Particularly for teenagers, it is so much about what your friends are doing.
Totally.
You've built that friendship group up over all those years in school, and you kind of think, maybe I would like to stay on with my mates and have that other 2 years where you're not like out into the working environment.
Absolutely.
And so you did then eventually make the decision.
Absolutely. To stick with his choice. Because we thought, and he thought he led it, and I think it's up to me and my husband as a parents to listen to him, to communicate, but to effectively listen and not put our anxieties onto him. So it may have been the easier choice, and I do think for him it probably might have been the easier choice to stay on at school, because an apprenticeship route is not easy, because you're going into the big bad world of work, and the expectations of employers of the course. You're moving out of that secure, safe environment of school into an environment which you're unsure about, you've never experienced before, you're only 16. But now that I'm 2 years down the line, or 3 years down the line, that was the right decision. And the right choice for him. So we made that decision on that day to let's go and register. Let's get accepted onto your course. and then discuss the options rather than rush into something on the day of your exam results, because emotions are very high.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And
definitely.
there's so many stresses and influences, and sometimes at least if you have options, because we knew the school had said that he could stay.
Yeah.
So he had the option to stay and registered for A-levels, or he had the option to go and complete an apprenticeship. So I thought, unless we went to the college on that day, then there was an option closed.
Mm-hmm. Even just when you're talking there, I'm noticing some of your language, which is quite nice, because when I think about my own kind of experience, I'm thinking about, I mean, it's slightly different in GCSE because you're not, but applying for universities and things like that. The talk is always around like alternatives.
Yes.
Which makes you think that university is the right
Totally.
route, or even alternatives to staying on at school to do your A-levels.
Absolutely.
That word isn't, you're using the word options, which is really nice in terms of like, this is what you have in front of you. It's not just like, it's an alternative. You didn't get into university, or you didn't get back into school, so,
absolutely.
What will we do now type thing.
Yes.
So that's really nice, actually, to maybe even think about the kind of language that you're using with your young person, and it's not about like an alternative route as a negative type thing. It's about looking at what options you have and deciding what's right for you. I mean, it's normal for parents obviously to want the best for their child and to kind of have those sort of expectations, but I suppose it's just about managing, kind of, as you said, what the options are.
And I think language is very important, because I think it should start at an earlier stage. And I think back, because my son is 19, he was one of the first through the selection process, through the transfer test. And I think we as parents should look at language. So when you're looking at that, language like non-grammar can sound negative, that secondary schools are of a second base, the same as I think non-academic. And I didn't want to go down that route. And I suppose looking back at myself, when I completed my A-levels and I was waiting on my brown envelope, I didn't get what I wanted. But that opened the doors for me into a different journey. And I think we as parents should accept, and even as adults in our own careers, that learning is for life. And whatever our young person does now at 16, when they're 30, it can be a completely different career path. And I think it's opening our minds to that university is not for everyone. And just because you don't go down that academic route doesn't mean to say that you're a failure or second best. Some of our biggest industries in Northern Ireland are small, medium enterprises. If you look at the demographics in Northern Ireland, Mid-Ulster has some of the most successful businesses. And a lot of those were created out of giving our young people some skills, and those skills doesn't necessarily need to be academic. And the world is a small place.
I know. I mean, even when I think back myself, I was not a fantastic student, I wouldn't say. I was probably very average, but I got the results that I needed to get a university place, and did that, got a degree. Yes, loved university, but I probably loved it for the experience of it rather than the real academic side of it. But I got a degree, which, yes, is great, a third level qualification. But when I actually look at what I'm doing now, I did not gain any of the skills for what I do now through that kind of route. I did an internship after I left university, which gave me like invaluable work experience,
Totally.
Like, so it's all that experience after that academic route that actually got me to the career that I'm in now.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting. It is kind of thinking about the wider picture. It's very difficult to do that when you're in the moment and you're like, I haven't got the grades that I need or whatever, but it is just maybe taking a step back and thinking, do you know what, at the end of the day, a lot of the time people will tell you what's in that envelope. Those results actually don't have much of a bearing on what you're going to do in the future.
Absolutely. And I think what my son has gone through is tough. Going out into the real world, the expectations of employers is tough. And it's not an easy route. My son, the first 6 months was a challenge because his friends had chosen, to maybe do sport at a college, or they were picked 3 A-level subjects. They were going to the school to do that. So they were still maybe in bed when he was up at 6:30 in the morning to go to work.
Start working.
But I think as a parent, we thought he needs to be resilient. So that was his choice.
Yeah.
I think after the first or second week, he was for giving up immediately, because the reality of getting up so early, working that, to maybe 5 and 6 o'clock at night. But now 3 years on, like this week he's working in Dublin. He has worked in Cork, he's worked in Donegal. There's so many options for him, but it is not an easy route. And I think it's what the nature of that child is.
Yeah.
What best suits them.
Yeah.
I think it's more important that the young person's happy.
Yeah,
We all
absolutely.
worry about our young people's mental health and what their choice is, and is that right for them, and are they struggling? And I suppose for me as a mum of now a 19-year-old, what I've learned is to listen, but also ensure that they are responsible for their own choices. If they've made a choice, that they follow through on that. But also there's so many options there.
Yeah. That's fantastic, Maria. Thank you for chatting to me today about this. I think we've got some really good tips and advice there for parents in terms of looking at what the options are for their young people.
Okay.
Another thing we're keen to highlight on this episode is young people's potential beyond education. So I'm delighted to be joined by Carol Fitzsimons, who is the CEO of Young Enterprise NI, and we also have Joel White, and he is an alumni of Young Enterprise, but he also now works for them, which is lovely. Welcome along to this episode of the Parenting NI podcast. It's lovely to have you with us.
Lovely to be here.
Yes,
Great
delighted.
stuff. So maybe for some of our listeners, Carol, who don't know a lot about Young Enterprise and what it does, could you maybe give us a wee brief intro into what you guys do with young people?
Yep, Young Enterprise is part of a global enterprise education charity, and it's very much about developing the entrepreneurship skills of young people. So we work with young people aged 5 right through to 25, and we bring business mentors in to help them set up and run their own businesses, and then give them opportunities to sell to the public. And it's all about giving them the chance to get an understanding of the skills they'll need for work, and to actually develop and improve and become competent in those skills while they're still at school.
Yeah, fantastic. And maybe Joel, from your perspective, having been through a Young Enterprise programme, could you maybe talk a little bit about that and your experience of it?
Yeah, so I did the company programme only last year with Carrot Grammar, and it was an incredible experience. I was the managing director of our little company and ended up winning the Young Entrepreneur of the Future Award, which was really brilliant, and got to go to Canada with Young Enterprise. Went to the Next Generation Leaders Forum, which was like a business conference for young people, and that really, I think, coming out of school, that really set me in good stead with like an inner confidence in my own abilities, and sort of knew that towards like results time, I wasn't sort of relying on what those little, great, like those letters said, you know.
Yeah.
So that was a big thing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's equipped you with more skills really than just kind of what you get through the traditional academic route of going out and getting results.
Absolutely, yeah.
And that is our main focus of this month's episode. So I suppose thinking about that when you were maybe getting that letter, and yourself, Carol, if you think back to then, how did you guys do at school? How did you kind of feel around that time? Would you have any tips for parents maybe about managing that stress and the expectations around getting those results, and then maybe from a pupil's perspective as well?
Yeah, I do. Actually, still a long time ago, but I do still remember and think it's those things that stick in your head. I did really well in my GCSEs. I didn't do as well as had been expected. I still did well in my A-levels, but not to the level that had been expected. So I didn't get into the university that I chose and had to go elsewhere. And at the time was devastated and had always done well. So really wasn't equipped with the resilience to know how to cope when I didn't do well. And I think as a parent now of a 6-year-old and a 12-year-old, that's something I'm very conscious of. He's been just recently through the transfer test. We've done the first year school exams, and it's something I'm very aware of, helping prepare him for both, yes, working hard to do well, but also preparing him for what happens if you don't. and how do you build that sort of resilience. And I think it's quite difficult balance for parents, because you want to support them and encourage them to do the best they can do, but at the same time trying to remember that whether you mean to or not, you are then putting pressure on them, and maybe an expectation that when we talked to him before the transfer test, his concern wasn't the result. His concern, he said, was letting us down, which is really hard to hear as a parent, and certainly not what we wanted to do. And I think then it's about trying to talk through and say, well, let's do a little bit of scenario planning, for want of a better term. So we said, if you get the result that you want, what will you do? If you don't, what are your other choices? Are those good choices? Are you happy with those? Yes. So then that's okay. And trying to reassure him that there are alternative ways that you can go. It's just a moment in time, and even if there's an exam that you still really want to do, that's one moment in time. We have a culture now of lifelong learning. You can go back and do it later. You can do it in different places. You can do it in different ways. But I think in that moment, you don't see any of that.
It's hard
and
to
that's
see
the
past
hard
that
thing,
when
is
you're...
to see past. So I think it's important, rather than having those conversations after the results, actually try and have them before.
Doing it in advance.
In advance, so that there's a little bit of reassurance of, whatever the result is, we will get through that together.
Yeah. And what about yourself, Joel? Maybe coming at it from the perspective of a pupil, would you have any advice? I mean, I remember getting really nervous about what was going to be in that envelope.
It's such a scary time in life, because your whole school life, all you've really known is getting through school, getting those grades that you need. And for me, it was this time last year, that summer, you're just thinking the whole time, what are those little grades going to say? And I was the same as Carol. Did well at GCSE, A-level not so well. I didn't get the grades I needed to get into, I was going for a school leavers programme with PwC. But again, through Young Enterprise, they appreciated the skills that I'd learned there, and the achievements I got there. So I managed to get on that, which was great. But it's that expectation you put on yourself, and you sort of put that on family as well. You know your mum and dad want you to do well. You know that your family are wanting that, and the embarrassment of having to tell people how you've done, because there is such a pressure, and it really depends on the school you go to as well. I think so. I was at a grammar school, and a lot of grammar schools, I don't think mine in particular, but they can be really grade factories. That's your purpose, and there is such a short-term focus on get your A-levels, get to university, and get the job you need, where when you come out of school, you sort of realise that there's not that same pressure, and as you said, Carol, that sort of continuous learning throughout your life. There's no real pressure to go and do that right now.
And I suppose that's something, I mean, even when I reflect back on my education, and I mean, I'm still learning things as I go along. I mean, what I did at school and what my degree was in is very different actually to what I'm now doing. So I suppose, is that something that we could maybe reassure parents about, and young people, encourage parents to share with their young people that really, as you say, Carol, in that moment it might seem like a massive issue or problem, but it doesn't really impact that much on your life in the future.
Yeah, probably the effect on mental health is huge for...
True.
Yeah, and I also notice coming out of school, there's it's a strange time as well. That sort of, did you ever sort of think,
transition?
Yeah, that transition from like your expectations.
You're an adult now.
You're sort of but even you are like king of the castle when you're in school, upper sixth, and then all of a sudden you're like no one. You're an adult. No one really cares.
I suppose when you get into, like, if you're at further education or you're out into the world of work, it's like you are kind of on your own in the big bad world, and there's no one kind of guiding you in that sense.
And I think you find some people thrive in that and some people crash. Like you've got the people who maybe care too much in school, maybe were a bit shy or a bit nervous. They really find themselves, and they get into things, and they're not afraid to like be their own person. And then you've got the other end of the spectrum where people maybe really thrived in school, and all of a sudden they're just really affected because they don't have that constant support group, that constant group of people around them that they're really valued. So I think that's I've noticed that just my first year out of school, a lot of people suffering from mental health problems with that, so it's interesting. Although I wouldn't be surprised with social media how you'd think there would have to be a rise, with how prevalent that is.
And I suppose there's a bit of kind of, as you mentioned, social media there. If you've got friends that are going off to university or getting these jobs and everything, it's people's highlight reel, really.
Yeah,
Isn't it?
exactly,
It's not
yeah.
necessarily real life.
Yeah.
So that has an impact on mental health too for young people.
I think on the social media point, that is something that around results time is also very important to consider how you approach that. Same thing for my son after a transfer test. I think it's the same for when you see the GCSE and A level results coming out. Be considerate to others. There are others out there have not maybe got what they expected, and certainly that wasn't around when I got my results. So I think it's, even as a parent, even if you're exceptionally proud of your child and what they've achieved, it's enough just to say, we've had a great day, delighted, or you don't need to put every single result the child's got up. And I think it's very dangerous for parents to get sucked into that on a day when, more than anything, the child probably just needs you to be with them one-on-one in person, as opposed to on social media, and for themselves as well, to maybe be careful what they're posting up and be conscious of the feelings of their friends around them.
Maybe on other families too. Yeah, absolutely. And maybe just planning something nice to do with your kids.
Or maybe reasonably, regardless, we're going out, not a, if you do well, we'll go out. So it's like, you haven't done as well as expected, so we'll not go out today. Do you know, that's not great. So it needs to not, it's too late, the exams are done. So it just needs to be, let's go out and be glad that it's over and it's past.
My mum and dad were very good at that. They always took the day off, and it was either, we're going to go out at this time, and say it doesn't go too well before, then we've got time to really sort your life out for the next year.
And and maybe on the day it's hard to deal with all of that on the day, so I think sometimes as well you just need to give yourself step back. And I know with the universities it can be different, because there is stuff you maybe need to do straight away, but I think again, if you've talked through that in advance and sort of had a bit of a plan of what are the options that you're going to go for, then you kind of have that plan B in place.
It's just a little bit of preparation really. And something that actually you mentioned at the start there, Joel, was how your experience with Young Enterprise actually, regardless of grades, let's forget about maybe what people are finding in the envelope, helped you on your career path.
Yeah, well, for me it really just it completely changed my career trajectory. I was dead set on doing physiotherapy before, and then I just loved Young Enterprise. I loved selling. I loved that real experience you had, and it opened my eyes to a world of business that I didn't know was there, which was incredible. And then from there, sort of looked down an accountancy route, and then after being in that accountancy route, turned out I didn't really enjoy that at all. So now I'm trying to go down the entrepreneurial route, so trying to launching my own app in the next week or so. So just whenever that comes out. So in review at the minute, so waiting for that to come out. But
can you talk about what the app is?
Yeah, absolutely. Shameless plug here. Yeah. So it's
not?
called Osio, and it is an app with the purpose of supporting local independent retailers. So businesses sign up for free and can give any discounts or deals that they have, and then users sign up and they can like their favourite businesses and access all deals from local businesses across Northern Ireland.
Fantastic.
So that's the plan. But really, for me, Young Enterprise just gave me a sense of confidence in myself, confidence in the skills I already had, that they're useful in other ways. You don't need to go down a traditional career path, and that I can use the skills that I have and just create something, just do something. And just even creating a really basic product, it sort of lets you see what you can do there, and that there is room for us to try something really.
That's really cool, and great that those skills are being fostered in young people through some of the Young Enterprise programs, and not only in terms of confidence there, as you were saying, but in terms of kind of equipping you with skills for the workplace, I suppose. And I mean, when I think back on my own experience in school, I mean, I didn't necessarily think that careers advice was brilliant. But I mean, I suppose that's maybe because at 16, 17, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I mean, how can you kind of prepare a child for that? I guess for any parents listening here maybe thinking, what kind of path will their child go down now? Is there any kind of advice you would give on that?
Yeah, I mean, careers teachers, and particularly now, have a very challenging role to undertake. When you look at the amount of different new jobs that are out there, and we know from, you see all the reports coming out that the young people nowadays are going to be doing jobs that don't exist yet. So how can you actually help a young person plan to do that? So I think what we need to do is flip that model around and encourage young people and their parents to learn how to look at the employment landscape and understand what's there, and to be ready and prepared for a career that won't be a linear pathway. And even, our volunteers that go into schools from business, one of the things we ask them to do is to talk about their career path, because in reality, very few people have a linear career path. They've moved. I used to work in the private sector and manufacturing, and I've ended up running a charity. So, how would a careers teacher have mapped that out? So it's really trying to flip it around and say, well, what are the skills you have? How will you be able to transfer those? And not being scared of that. I think we still very much try and expect a careers teacher to have a crystal ball to give us an answer to a question. As you say, we don't know what we want to do. We maybe haven't experienced it yet. So I think, again, that sort of feeds back into the whole aspect of, I know when I took my first job in manufacturing, I was really worried, what if I've chosen the wrong job? And what will I do? And my mum said, well, then you can change job or, retrain. Had never occurred to me that was an option, because, again, I think, it's such a conveyor belt at that point that you're just focused on, I need to then get into my career. So I think that sort of aspect of really just reducing the pressure in that way of saying it's okay, go undertake a job, and you can move sectors, you can move all sorts of ways, but in every job you will have certain core skills, which are the core skills we look at in company of, time management, project management, ability to deal with people, which are all the skills that the skills barometer and the OCD say are going to be in demand, because it's the human skills that we need to develop.
And I suppose that's something that people are maybe a bit afraid of in the workplace too, that technology is developing at such a fast rate, and as you say, I mean, that is very true. You probably can't predict what jobs are going to be out there, but it is about, you'll always need that human aspect to it, so it's maybe not being afraid of that, what's coming down the line.
I think what is also important as we go through that process is to realise there's a lot of valuable information out there on the internet. And again, sort of going back to the social media thing, I would work with SIA, and they have very good information that they'll put out on results day, as opposed to, you quite often will see people on forums saying, well, I think that this is what this means, and different parents discussing it. And again, it's back to, well, that's probably not the best time to get the advice from your friend whose child maybe did something similar 4 years ago. That's the time to go and get the factual information, be it from yourselves and Parenting NI, or the place they want to go to or whatever. But I think it's an important time to get back to facts rather than just what your friend thinks from what they did.
That's great. If there's maybe any parents listening to this who think they'd like their young person to get involved, or maybe to check in with you guys, with Young Enterprise, how can they get in touch with you and find out a wee bit more?
They can, if they go to the website, they'll be able to contact us from there. But most important thing is ask in your school and say, is my child having their employability and their entrepreneurship skills developed? Do you run Young Enterprise? And if they do, get them involved. And if they don't, encourage them to get involved.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for talking to me today and giving me insight into the work that you do, and also talking about your own experiences. That was a really good discussion. Thank you.
So much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we sign off for this month's episode, just a quick update to let you know that we have launched this year's Big Parenting Survey, and we want to hear from as many parents as possible about the realities of parenting in Northern Ireland. This year we do have a particular focus on technology, because that was something that you told us was a big concern in the 2018 survey. So please visit our website, that's parentingni.org, or our social media, which you can just get us on /parentingni and all the usual platforms, and you'll be able to find out more about how to take the survey, which should only take a few minutes. It's important that you have your say in order for us to advocate on your behalf and ensure that services meet your needs. So thanks again for listening. If you would be so kind to subscribe to the podcast, that would be great. That means you get notifications every time a new episode drops. And if you could also give us a rating and a review, if you're enjoying listening, that would be really helpful, because that raises the visibility of the podcast for other parents to find us. So thanks again, and I'll talk to you next month. Take care.